Have a sweet nightmares. My name is Patrick. I'm a 45-year-old average Joe living in Eureka, a small city in Northern California. Life was pretty monotonous until that day. The day I stumbled upon a yard sale that was anything but ordinary. Eureka has always been a quaint city, nestled between the tranquil Pacific Ocean and the dense sequoia forests. It's known for its Victorian architecture, but there's a sense of timelessness and mystery that lingers in the air. Perhaps it's the fog that rolls in from the ocean, obscuring the city and making it seem like a place caught between reality and fiction. It was a typical Saturday. The sun was high, the sky was clear, and the city was bathed in a warm golden hue. As I walked down the quiet streets, I noticed a weathered sign for a yard sale. I was never a fan of yard sales, but something about this one piqued my interest. The sign was old and worn out, and it pointed towards a narrow alleyway that seemed to be swallowed by shadows. As I followed the sign, I found myself in front of a nondescript house that looked like it had seen better days. The house itself was a Victorian-era building, its grandeur faded but still evident in the intricate woodwork and towering spires. The yard was filled with items that seemed as ancient as the house itself. Everything from rusted tools, old furniture, and piles of dusty books were scattered haphazardly. The owner of the house, an elderly man with a hunched back and piercing blue eyes, was sitting in a rocking chair. He had a certain aura about him that was both intriguing and unnerving. His eyes followed me as I started looking through the items. Suddenly, something caught my eye. A beautiful antique mirror with a gilded frame. It was surprisingly clean compared to the other items, and it reflected the sunlight in such a mesmerizing way. I found myself drawn towards it. I asked the old man how much he wanted for it. His lips curled into a sly grin as he named an absurdly low price. I grabbed the opportunity and bought the mirror, thinking it would be a good addition to my house. Little did I know I was in for a terrifying surprise. As I hung the mirror in my living room, I noticed something odd. The reflection in the mirror was delayed. It was as if the mirror was capturing a moment a few seconds after it happened. I shrugged it off as an illusion, a trick of the light perhaps. Things started to get weird that night. I woke up to a cold breeze and the sound of shuffling feet. I thought it was a burglar, but when I checked, everything was as I left it. The mirror was the only thing out of place. It was tilted at an angle as if someone had moved it. I adjusted it, thinking it must have been the wind, and went back to bed. The following day I was startled to find my living room in disarray. The furniture was upturned and the mirror was on the floor unbroken. I was confused and scared, but I convinced myself it was an intruder. I decided to install security cameras to catch the culprit. The next few nights were even more terrifying. I would wake up to strange sounds, whispers, giggles, and loud thuds. The security footage showed nothing. It was as if the sounds were coming from the mirror itself. One night I decided to stay up and watch the mirror. As the night deepened, I saw my reflection in the mirror distort. It twisted and contorted into something grotesque, something otherworldly. It was far from human, its eyes were glowing, and it bared its sharp, jagged teeth at me. I was paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, the creature lunged at me from the mirror. I felt a cold hand grab my throat. I struggled, trying to pry the hand off, but it was too strong. Just as I was about to pass out, the creature let go and disappeared back into the mirror. I was terrified. I wanted to get rid of the mirror, but I was afraid of what the creature might do. I decided to return it to the old man. When I reached his house, it was empty. The old man was nowhere to be found. The neighbors said he had moved out overnight. They also mentioned that he had been trying to sell that mirror for years, but nobody would take it. Now I knew why. I was stuck with the mirror and the creature that resided within it. I tried everything to get rid of it. I tried to break it, burn it, even bury it, but it always found its way back to my house. Today I live in constant fear. Each night is a battle for survival. I don't know what the creature wants or why it chose me, but I know one thing for sure. That yard sale was the biggest mistake of my life. And now, as I see my reflection morphing into that grotesque creature, I hope that this story finds you in time. Beware of yard sales, especially in Eureka. You never know what you might bring home. I remember it like it was yesterday. The sun was high in the sky, its rays beating down on the sleepy town of Green Hollow, Maine. Nestled between sprawling forests and tranquil lakes, the town was a snapshot of idyllic rural America. Main Street, with its charmingly mismatched buildings, was usually quiet except for the occasional car passing by. But this day was different, because it was the day of the town's annual yard sale. The yard sale was held in the town square, a wide-open space dominated by a large gazebo and surrounded by lush greenery. Houses sat along the perimeter, their occupants spilling their unwanted wares onto their front lawns. The square was buzzing with activity, locals and visitors alike rummaging through piles of old books, vintage clothes, and forgotten trinkets. As I walked down the road, the smell of musty old books mingled with the sweet aroma of Mrs. Patterson's apple pie. I passed by the old Thompson house, its lawn littered with faded furniture and dust-covered vinyl records. For years I had been a regular at these sales, always on the lookout for hidden gems. The next house belonged to the Martins, and their yard was filled with a jumble of toys and clothes, remnants of their kids' childhood. I was about to move on when something caught my eye. Partially hidden behind a stack of old board games was a peculiar-looking box. It was an old wooden chest, about the size of a shoebox. Its surface was intricately carved with strange symbols, unlike anything I had come across before. Intrigued, I picked it up, feeling the rough texture of the wood beneath my fingertips. The box was surprisingly heavy, and as I shook it, I could hear something rattling inside. I asked Mr. Martin about the box, but he seemed just as surprised as I was to see it. He didn't remember owning it and had no idea where it came from. Something about that box drew me in, and despite its unknown origins, I decided to buy it. As I walked home, box in hand, I could feel a strange energy emanating from it. It was as if the box was alive, and it filled me with a sense of unease. Back home, I carefully placed the box on my study table, the late afternoon sun making the symbols on it gleam. I reached for the latch, and as it clicked open, I held my breath. Inside was a small antique doll. Its eyes were eerily lifelike, and it had a strange, sickly, sweet smell about it. For days I was plagued by nightmares. In my dreams, the doll came to life, its eyes glowing with malice. Every morning I would wake up drenched in sweat, the image of the doll seared into my mind. I could hear strange noises around my house, like soft whispers and footsteps. Things got stranger when I started finding the doll in places I hadn't left it. One day it was on my bed, the next on the kitchen counter. The final straw was when I found it in my car, its glassy eyes staring at me. I was terrified, and decided to get rid of the doll. But as I reached for the doll, a searing pain shot through my hand. It felt like I had been burned, and as I pulled my hand away, I saw a small doll-shaped burn on my palm. It was then that I realized whatever was going on was not normal. In a panic, I drove back to the Martins, hoping they could shed some light on the situation. But when I got there, their house was empty, a for sale sign standing in the yard. The neighbors said they had left town suddenly without any explanation. I spent the following weeks living in fear, the doll seemingly omnipresent in my life. I tried everything to get rid of it, but nothing worked. It was there when I woke up, when I went to sleep, and everywhere in between. I was losing sleep, my days a haze of fear and paranoia. In desperation, I decided to seek help from a local historian, hoping he could tell me more about the box and the doll. As I explained my situation, his face paled. He told me about an old town legend, a tale of a cursed doll that brought misfortune to its owner. The only way to break the curse, he said, was to return the doll to its original resting place. With no other options, I followed his instructions, driving deep into the forest surrounding the town. As I placed the doll back into the box and buried it in the ground, I felt a sudden calm wash over me. I knew I had broken the curse. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences ceased, and I was finally able to sleep peacefully. The memory of the doll and the fear it instilled in me still lingered, but I was glad to be free of it. I vowed never to attend another yard sale, a promise I kept till this day. And that's my story. The tale of the yard sale that brought terror into my life. A reminder that not all that glitters is gold, and sometimes the things we find can be more than we bargained for. The summer sun had risen high in the sky of the small coastal town of Astoria, Oregon. If you've never been there, it's an idyllic little place, nestled between the Pacific Ocean and a thick coniferous forest, home to just under 10,000 people. The air always smells fresh, a mix of salty sea breeze and cool pine-scented woodland air. A perfect place for a yard sale, if you ask me. I was out for a stroll, the sun casting long shadows as it climbed. I decided to take a different route this time, turning down a narrow, tree-lined street I'd never been down before. That's when I saw it. A hand-painted sign on weathered wood, nailed to a tree, reading "Yard Sale," with an arrow pointing down a gravel driveway. Feeling adventurous, I followed the arrow, the crunch of the gravel under my boots the only sound apart from the distant cries of seagulls. The house the driveway led to was an old two-story Victorian, surrounded by overgrown greenery. It looked like something out of a history book, its paint peeling, its windows dusty. In the yard, a motley collection of odds and ends was laid out on tables and blankets. Old lamps, rusted tools, worn-out books, dusty vinyl records, and vintage toys. A frail old woman, hunched over and wrapped in layers of shawls, presided over the eccentric collection. I browsed, picking up random items, feeling their weight, wondering about their history. My eyes landed on something that was out of place. A shiny silver pocket watch. It was in stark contrast to the other items, gleaming under the sun, untouched by time. I picked it up, its cool metal against my skin. As I flipped it open, I was met with a sight that made my heart pound. Inside was an old photograph of a woman who looked exactly like the old lady running the yard sale. Except she was young, vibrant, and standing beside a man who looked eerily like me. Feeling a chill despite the warm weather, I showed the photo to the old woman, her eyes widening at the sight. She whispered something I could barely hear. "It's time." Then she held out a frail hand, insisting I take the watch for free. I left in a hurry, the watch burning in my pocket. I tried to shake off the eerie feeling, but the image of the woman and the man who looked like me kept coming back. That night, I dreamt of the woman, of lives lived in different eras, each ending with the same pocket watch in my hand. Days passed, the pocket watch never leaving my side. I started to notice things, a déjà vu of places I'd never been, an uncanny knowledge of events before they happened. I could feel myself changing, my life entwining with the watch's mysterious past. One day I woke up with a jolt. The pocket watch was gone. I searched everywhere, panic rising in me. I retraced my steps, back to the old Victorian house, but it was abandoned, the yard sale was gone, no sign of the old woman. Back home I found the pocket watch sitting on my doorstep. I picked it up. A note tucked inside. It read, "You've been chosen. Time will guide you." Heart pounding, I took a deep breath, stepping inside my house, the pocket watch back in my hand. As I closed the door, I couldn't help but feel my life was about to take a turn I couldn't predict. The story ends here, leaving room for the imagination, with more questions than answers. The pocket watch, the old woman, the man who looked like me, the note, all pointing to a mystery that was just beginning to unfold. The town of North Haven, Connecticut is just like any other typical small town in America. Tree-lined streets, old Victorian houses with white picket fences, a small lake that gleams under the summer sun, and friendly folks who'd always greet you with a smile. That's where I lived, in a two-story house on the corner of Church and Elm Street. It was a peaceful, almost idyllic place, until it wasn't. It was a Saturday morning. The sun was high in the sky, casting long, playful shadows on the ground. My neighbor, Mr. Thompson, was having his annual yard sale. He was a peculiar old man, lived alone, and had a strange fascination for antiques. The yard sale was his way of decluttering his house, filled to the brim with odds and ends he'd collected over the years. As usual, I decided to check out the yard sale. Rummaging through the piles of old books, rusted tools, and dusty porcelain dolls, I found an old metal box. It was small, about the size of a shoebox, rusted at the corners but otherwise in good condition. Upon opening the box, I found a collection of old black and white photos. They were pictures of the town from what seemed like a century ago. There was something eerie about those photos. They were of everyday scenes. The town square, the local bakery, the church. But in every single picture, there was a figure. A woman. Always in the background, always out of focus. But there was something about her that was unsettling. I asked Mr. Thompson about the photos, but all he said was that they were part of the town's history. The way he said it, though, it sent a chill through me. It was as if he was warning me about something. Things started to change after that. I began to notice things, strange things. Shadows that moved on their own, whispers in the middle of the night, a feeling of being watched. Then I saw her, the woman from the photos. The sightings became more frequent, more real. I would wake up in the middle of the night, feeling her cold breath on my neck. I would see her in the mirror standing behind me, her face hidden under a veil. I would hear her whisper, her voice cold and hollow, saying just one word: leave. I did what any sane person would do. I took the box back to Mr. Thompson, but he refused to take it. Said it was mine now. That's when I knew I was cursed. I tried everything, from burning the photos to burying the box, but nothing worked. She was always there, watching, waiting. My once peaceful home had turned into a living nightmare. I had no choice. I had to leave. As I drove away from North Haven, I looked at it one last time. It was still the same quaint town, with its serene lake and friendly folks. But there was something different, something darker. I left the town, the house, and my life behind, hoping to escape the horror that had consumed me. In the end, it was just a yard sale. A simple, harmless yard sale. But it changed everything. It changed me. I still see her sometimes in my dreams, always watching, always waiting. But at least she's not real anymore, or so I hope. I remember that day as if it was yesterday. The sun was high in the sky. Its heat was almost unbearable. This was a typical summer afternoon in the small town of Eufaula, Alabama. The town was pretty much like any other small town in the South. Everyone knew everyone. Houses with spacious yards, and a sense of community so strong that you would feel like a part of a large family. I was out, looking for some old items at a yard sale. The yard sale was at the end of the street, in front of an old Victorian house that had seen better days. The paint was peeling off. The once vibrant garden was now a weedy mess. It was owned by Mrs. Abigail, an old woman who was known to be a bit eccentric. She was known for her collection of odd trinkets and vintage items, which she displayed in her yard sale every summer. I walked around, scanning through the tables filled with dusty old books, broken furniture, and vintage clothes. I was about to leave when something caught my eye. It was an old music box with intricate carvings and a faded gold finish. It was out of place among the mundane items. I picked it up and turned the key. A soft melody began to play. It was soothing, yet there was something eerie about it. I felt a chill, but I shrugged it off and decided to buy it. Things started to get weird after I brought the music box home. I felt like I was being watched. The feeling was so strong that it was impossible to ignore. I would hear whispers in the middle of the night, and objects around the house would move on their own. But the strangest thing was that the music box would start playing by itself at exactly 3 a.m. every night. I thought I was losing my mind, but then, one night I saw her. A figure of a woman standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me with hollow eyes. She was dressed in Victorian-era clothes. Her skin was pale, and she had an aura of dread around her. She would appear every night at exactly 3 a.m., the same time the music box would start playing. I decided to get rid of the music box. I took it back to Mrs. Abigail, but she refused to take it back, saying that it was now my burden to bear. Desperate, I tried to destroy it, but no matter what I did, it would reappear in my house, intact. Finally, I decided to seek the help of a local priest. He performed a ritual to exorcise the spirit attached to the box. The house trembled, the lights flickered, and I could hear a woman scream, and then silence. The music box stopped playing, the woman stopped appearing, and the strange occurrences ceased. I still live in the same house. The music box is still with me, but it no longer plays by itself. Yet even now, every time I see that box, I can't help but feel a chill running through my body. And every time I pass by a yard sale, I think twice before picking up an item. You never know what you might bring home. And this, my friend, is my scary true yard sale horror story. A tale of an ordinary man in an ordinary town. who had an extraordinary experience. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the things we own might end up owning us. There's a quaint little town in the heart of Massachusetts dubbed Shrewsbury. It's one of those places where the leaves turn a fiery red in the fall. The locals are friendly, and the air smells a touch sweeter than anywhere else. It's picturesque, it's serene, and it's where our tale unfolds. My name is David. As a retired cop, I've seen my fair share of horror and heartbreak, but nothing, and I mean nothing, had prepared me for what I was about to encounter on that sunny afternoon of June. Like any other Saturday, the town was bustling with yard sales. I decided to visit one on the outskirts of Shrewsbury, a place where the houses were fewer and farther apart. The sale was in a ramshackle house with a peeling paint job, surrounded by overgrown weeds that seemed to crawl up the walls. The yard was filled to the brim with odds and ends, a sea of objects, each with its story untold. I was drawn to an old-looking trunk, its mahogany wood worn out with age. The vendor, an elderly man with a sinister smile, was more than happy to sell it for a bargain. I was intrigued. With the trunk secured in the back of my truck, I drove home, completely unaware of the nightmare I had just invited into my life. As I began to rummage through the contents of the trunk, I found an assortment of items. Dusty books, a broken pocket watch, and a stack of old letters tied with a faded red ribbon. Curiosity piqued. I carefully untied the ribbon and began to read. The letters were from a certain Thomas to his beloved Emily, detailing their secret affair. As I read further, the letters began to turn ominous. Thomas spoke of strange occurrences, of feeling watched, and of a creeping sense of dread that wouldn't leave him. The last letter was a desperate plea for Emily to run away with him, to escape the terror that had taken hold of his life. A chill passed through me, a sense of unease settling in my gut. I shook it off and decided to continue exploring the trunk. Beneath the letters, I found a small, ornate box. As I opened it, a sickly smell filled the room. Inside, carefully wrapped in a silk handkerchief, was a lock of hair tied with a ribbon identical to the one from the letters. Suddenly, I felt watched. I couldn't shake off the feeling that someone or something was observing me. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. I heard whispers, faint but clear, echoing through the silence of the room. Panic started to set in, my heart pounding against my chest. The whispers grew louder, turning into a cacophony of voices, each more desperate than the last. I could make out a single phrase being repeated over and over. "Run, Emily, run!" The room darkened. The temperature dropped, and a cold wind blew through the room, knocking over the trunk and scattering its contents. I was frozen in place, my mind racing to make sense of the insanity unfolding before me. A shadowy figure materialized in front of me. It was Thomas, his eyes filled with terror and pleading for help. I tried to move, to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. Thomas reached out, his hand passing through me as if I were a ghost. "Help me. Save Emily," he whispered before disappearing, leaving me alone in the room. The horror of it all hit me like a ton of bricks. I had unwittingly stumbled upon a curse, a tale of love and terror that had transcended the barriers of time. I was now a part of it, a player in a deadly game that I did not sign up for. I spent the following days researching, learning about Thomas and Emily and the dark fate that had befallen them. I realized that the only way to end the horror was to break the curse, to help Thomas save Emily. As I pieced together their story, I felt a growing sense of resolve. I was going to end this, not just for me, but for them too. I was determined to face the horror head-on, to fight the terror that had seeped into my life. And so my journey began, a journey into a world of darkness, mystery, and ancient curses. It was a journey that would change me forever, a journey that would test my courage and my will to survive. But I was ready. After all, I'm David, the man who's seen it all, and I was far from done. The heat was unbearable in the small town of Mena, Arkansas. The sun beat down mercilessly, scorching the cracked streets, the wooden houses, and the dusty yards. In this quiet, somewhat forgotten corner of the world, life had a slow, languid pace. People moved with a sense of lethargy, a languor born from the harsh weather and the town's isolation. But today, something was different. There was a yard sale at the old mansion at the end of Elm Street. The house was an imposing structure that was once the grandest in town, but had declined into a decrepit, ghostly edifice over the years. I'd never seen a soul enter or exit, yet today, a sea of faded artifacts from a bygone era lay sprawled across the overgrown lawn, while a thin, stooped figure, presumably the owner, sat silently in a worn-out chair overseeing the proceedings. I am not a man easily enticed by trinkets. I've seen enough of life to know that material possessions are but temporary distractions from the harsh realities. But something about that yard sale intrigued me. An inexplicable curiosity drew me in, and I found myself wandering among the scattered relics of the past, each object whispering untold stories of yesteryears. There were old pocket watches with hands frozen in time, oil paintings of people long gone, porcelain dolls with lifeless eyes, and countless other items, each dustier and more forgotten than the last. As I ambled through the haphazard arrangement, a weathered leather suitcase caught my eye. It was ordinary, probably from the 1950s or 60s, but it had an aura of mystery around it. I reached out to touch it, and the owner, a frail man with sunken eyes and a gaunt face, suddenly looked up. His gaze was as sharp as a falcon's, and it made me recoil slightly. "That's not for sale," he rasped, his voice barely audible. But I'd already unlatched the clasp. The suitcase opened with a creak, revealing a stack of old letters, a few black and white photos, and an old yellowed map. The map was of Mina, but it looked different. There were additional streets, buildings that no longer exist, and an intricate network of tunnels beneath the town. What intrigued me most was a red cross marked on a certain location, the old mines at the outskirts of town, abandoned decades ago. Driven by a reckless impulse, I decided to investigate. As the sun set, I set off for the mines, the map my only guide. The tunnels were as abandoned and desolate as the rest of the town, the silence only broken by the distant drip of water. I followed the map until I reached the spot marked by the red cross. What I found there shook me to my core. A hidden chamber filled with human bones, hundreds of them piled up like firewood. A grim testament to some horrifying, forgotten massacre. Fear gripped me, but I knew I had to share this gruesome discovery. I raced back to town, the chilling echo of the bone-filled cavern still ringing in my ears. But when I reached the yard sale, it was deserted. The old man, the suitcase, the relics, all gone. The mansion stood there as silent and eerie as before. I reported everything to the local sheriff, but the investigation turned up nothing. No bones, no hidden chamber, not even the tunnels from the map. It was as if I'd imagined it all. The yard sale, the suitcase, the chilling discovery. Nothing remained but a haunting memory. I still live in Mina, still haunted by that horrifying day. I pass by the mansion every day, but it remains silent, its secrets buried deep within. And I can't help but wonder, was it all real? Or was it just a macabre tale spun by an old man in an ordinary suitcase from a yard sale? I guess I'll never know. As I pulled up to the yard sale in the heart of St. Augustine, Florida, the humid summer heat was already causing beads of sweat to trickle down my forehead. The sun, a glaring orb in the cloudless sky, cast long shadows across the cracked pavement and weathered houses. The neighborhood, once a bustling suburban area, was now a ghost town with faded picket fences and overgrown yards. An eerie silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant hum of cicadas and the occasional cawing of a raven. The yard sale was held at an old Victorian house. Its paint was peeling, shutters hanging askew, and the once lush garden had wilted under the relentless sun. A large sign, hastily painted with the words "Yard Sale," hung on the rusty wrought iron gate. It creaked ominously as I pushed it open, the sound echoing in the stillness. The yard was filled with a bizarre assortment of items. Antique furniture, china dolls with faded eyes, stacks of yellowed books and worn-out vinyl records. An old man, frail and hunched, sat behind a makeshift table, his rheumy eyes watching me with an intensity that was unnerving. His smile, devoid of warmth, sent a chill down my spine, despite the sweltering heat. "Take your time, son," he rasped, his voice as dry as the rustling leaves in the wind. "You'll find something you need." I nodded, unease creeping in as I began to sift through the items. Each piece seemed to hold a story, a memory, a part of someone's life. The air felt heavy, as if weighed down by the collective past of these objects. I picked up a dusty photo album filled with sepia-toned pictures of people long gone. Their eyes, frozen in time, followed me as I flipped through the pages. As the day wore on, the old man never moved from his spot, his gaze never leaving me. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, of being studied. It was as if he was waiting, biding his time for something. Then I found it. An old, worn pocket watch. Its gold casing was tarnished, and the glass was scratched, but it held a certain allure. The second hand was stuck at the 12 mark, frozen in time. It was beautiful in its own decrepit way, so I decided to buy it. "Ah," the old man's voice croaked as I approached him. "You found it." His smile widened, revealing yellowed teeth. "Just remember, time waits for no one." The words hung in the air as I handed him the money, his gnarled fingers brushing against mine, sending an unexpected jolt of cold through me. As I left, I could still feel his eyes boring into my back, his words echoing in my head. That night, as the moon bathed my room in a soft glow, I placed the watch on my bedside table. As I drifted off to sleep, I heard a faint ticking sound. I glanced at the watch. The second hand was moving. Days turned into weeks, and strange things began to happen. I was losing time. Hours slipped away like minutes, days like hours. I was late for work, missed appointments, and even my reflections seemed to age rapidly. I was growing old, faster than I should be. The watch, it was the watch. The second hand, which was once stuck, now moved with a relentless precision. Each tick seemed to echo the old man's words, "Time waits for no one." It was taking my time, my life. In a fit of fear and desperation, I drove back to the house, but it was empty. The yard sale was gone. The old man had vanished, leaving behind a desolate house and a chilling silence. The only thing that remained was the sign, swinging in the wind, its words a stark reminder of the horrifying truth. As I sit here now, the watch beside me, I can feel my time slipping away. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It's relentless, unforgiving. As I pen down the story, my hands, now frail and spotted with age, struggle to keep up. I want to warn you, to tell you about the yard sale, the watch, the old man. But time, it waits for no one. And my time, it's running out. I was never a fan of yard sales. Something about rifling through other people's discarded belongings just never sat right with me. But there I was, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in the heart of Salem, Massachusetts, drawn in by a handwritten sign that read, "Yard Sale." The sign, attached to a wooden pole, was weathered and worn, as if it had been up for ages, waiting for someone like me to stumble upon it. The house hosting the yard sale was an old 2-story colonial home, its white paint peeling off to reveal the aged wood beneath. The front yard was strewn with items that seemed as old as the house itself. Tables were overflowing with dusty books, chipped china, rusted tools, and faded clothes. And standing amidst it all was an elderly man, his back hunched and his face weathered by time. The old man's eyes lit up as he saw me. "Ah, a customer? Come, come," he beckoned, and I found myself stepping into the cluttered yard. I hadn't planned to buy anything. I was just killing time before a meeting. But the man seemed so eager it felt rude to turn back. I started perusing through the items, half-heartedly picking up a book here and a tool there. Nothing was particularly interesting. Until I reached the far corner of the yard. There was a table covered with various trinkets. Among them was a small, ornate box. It was beautiful, made of dark wood, with intricate carvings and a shiny brass latch. I picked it up, admiring the craftsmanship. "Ah, you found my treasure box," the old man said, appearing next to me. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I nodded, running my fingers over the carvings, feeling a strange pull towards the box. "How much is it?" $50, he said. It was a steep price for a yard sale item, but there was something about the box that made me want to own it. So I handed over the money, tucked the box under my arm, and walked away, feeling an odd sense of satisfaction. At home, I found a place for the box on my study desk. It looked perfect there, like it was always meant to be. I opened it to find it empty. Not surprising, but somehow I felt disappointed. I shrugged it off, closing the box and getting back to my work. The next morning I woke up to a strange sound. It was faint, like a distant whisper. I followed the sound and found myself in my study, standing before the box. I opened the box, and the whispering stopped. The box was still empty. I stared at it, feeling a chill run down my spine. I shook my head, attributing the sound to lack of sleep. I closed the box and went about my day. But as days turned into weeks, the whispering continued. I could hear it only when I was near the box. It was nonsense, random words strung together, but it was incessant, gnawing at my sanity. I tried getting rid of the box. I threw it in the trash, but found it back on my desk the next day. I tried burning it, but the flames wouldn't touch it. I tried burying it, but woke up to find it on my bedside table. I was losing sleep, losing weight, and slowly losing my mind. The whispering was always there, a constant background noise. I couldn't focus on my work, couldn't enjoy my meals, couldn't have a peaceful moment. I was trapped in my own house, haunted not by a ghost, but by a box. Driven to desperation, I decided to go back to the yard sale. I had to find the old man, had to find a way to get rid of the box. But when I reached the neighborhood, the house was gone. Not demolished, just gone, as if it never existed. The neighbors stared at me like I was crazy when I asked about the house and the old man. I returned home, defeated and desolate. The whispering was louder than ever. I picked up the box, screamed at it, begged it to stop. And then it did. The silence was deafening. I opened the box. It was still empty, but as I stared into it, I saw something, not with my eyes, but with my mind. Memories flooded in, not mine, but of others. Sorrow, joy, fear, love. It was overwhelming, too much to bear. I don't know how long I sat there, the box open in front of me, but when I came back to my senses, I felt different, lighter yet fuller. The box was a vessel not for objects, but for emotions. It held the emotions of its previous owners, accumulated over centuries. I understood then why the old man sold it. He was freeing himself, passing on his burden, and now it was mine. The box sits on my desk, silent now. I know it's not empty. It holds within it a piece of my spirit, my fears, my hopes, my emotions. It's my treasure now, my curse, my companion. I dread the day when the box will start whispering again, when it will be time to pass it on. Until then, it's just me and the box in this old house, waiting for the next yard sale. Wow, we made it through those 9 scary yard sale horror stories. If you enjoyed them, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss any future creepy tales. There's a lot more where that came from. Check out our other videos for more chills and thrills. As always, thanks for watching and stay spooky.